Welcome to If Prices Could Talk. We're doing a rundown of pricing in the news. So the headlines today, we've got a mix of mergers, acquisitions, new markets, inflation, upflation. So we've got a bunch of different topics here, and then AI and negotiations. We've got Jeet, Pete, and Adnan as our subject matter experts. So we'll see what we can get in terms of takeaways for B2B pricing, negotiations, and innovation, especially around AI. I feel like there's a lot to cover here.
Awesome.
So let's start with Netflix. Let me read the headline and then we'll get into this one. So this was in Variety. Netflix to open massive entertainment, dining, and shopping complexes in 2 cities in 2025. So we talked about this last summer. It was in the context of like expansion. This was also, we were talking about Heineken was measuring brand experiences. So like we've got these big brands that are kind of doing new things. At the time, Netflix was doing some pop-up locations. So it seems like their idea with this is to kind of build off of those pop-ups that were mostly successful. Like the idea is that it's not exactly a theme park, but they're calling them Netflix houses that are marketing for supporting their core streaming business. So one is going to be in Texas. The other one is going to be actually pretty close to me in King of Prussia, which if you're not familiar with the Philly area, for anybody that's watching, like King of Prussia has been this huge mall. So they're going to take some of the old department stores and turn it into these Netflix houses. So there's a couple things about this, but just broadly, how do you see this benefiting Netflix? Lots with marketing, I guess, right?
It's interesting to think about the broader take of almost the convergence of retail and e-commerce, even though Netflix isn't quite e-commerce, it's streaming, but everyone wants to have this mix of experience in person and then multiple channels where you can buy from. And so I feel like with Netflix, it's probably dipping into how do you be a streamer where whether it's your own content or licensed content, you have a little bit more of an experience or loyalty reason for getting that in-person connection.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think some of these brands like Netflix has become bigger than just what it's known for, right? So it started off as a streaming service, then it became a content creator. Now it's a living, breathing brand, and it's monetizing itself in multiple ways. And that's what happens with some of these brands, and they're creating content that's very sort of influential in people's lives, and people want to connect with that series or that television show or whatever you want to call these things, and they want to be, and people go gaga. It kind of reminds me of Comic-Con and some other things where you get connected to a character, you dress up as those characters even in your 30s and 40s, I guess, and go to these Comic-Cons, these conventions, and they're able to monetize in multiple ways that connection to the brand that these consumers have. And I think it's smart for Netflix to first test it out through pop-ups, know that there is a steady stream in these experiential, environments, and be able to, invest in it. I think it's smart.
What really stands out to me is like the level of adaptability that Netflix has historically had as an organization, right? You mentioned the history of them. And I remember way back when they first started out, it was awesome because you go online and I would order some DVDs. They come in the mail and you're super excited. You're like, I didn't even have to leave my house and go to the video store. And these things just continually come in the mail. Then they transform to a streamer and are now a content provider. But that draw of Netflix had initially been the fact that you don't have to leave your house. It's convenient. And that was a behavioral change over the past few decades that people have really embraced. And now there's an element of like, well, you know what? After COVID and such, I kind of want to leave my house, right? And there's this kind of overconsumption of Netflix. So now they've shifted gears a little bit, again, based on consumer behavior, and are testing out this new presence where they're using the benefit of the brand that they have built over the past few decades to offer their audiences something where they had that combination of the convenience of in-house streaming, but also using that brand to offer entertainment for people in an adjacent market. So, I mean, I think their level of experimentation and adaptability based on these kind of broader behavioral trends is something that is fascinating. And then when we start to think about our clients and like even say B2B behavior change, that adaptability is a consideration that is likely applicable to most businesses out there.
I think part of it is because Netflix has grown so much, they're now at a place where they can have these like sub brands within Netflix. Like Bridgerton is its own brand. And so you could go and experience Bridgerton and get the food or merch or whatever, but they've gotten to that phase now where all these Stranger Things, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones.
You know, it's interesting. I'm glad Adnan was smart in making his connection to B2B pricing, because I think there's a lot to learn. You know, as soon as he said it, one of the things that struck me is it is true how Netflix is changing their business model based on their consumer. And what's really interesting to me also is that if they had told themselves that they're a DVD company or they told themselves that they're a streaming platform, they would have never evolved, right? And what they did was listen to what's important for the consumer and how the consumers are behaving and what they want and need, how they consume, how they make decisions, and they're able to pivot and broaden their definition of who they are. And I think oftentimes we see clients who are very adamant about being laser focused and being sort of very targeted in how they take care of their customers, what they do, and they don't want to deviate. But customers are evolving. Their competitors are evolving. Markets are changing, right? Tracy and I talk about it all the time. It's a dynamic world, and to have a static go-to-market approach is probably going to be the death of you. So kudos to Netflix.
Cool. All right. Let's talk about amusement parks. All right. So this is CNN. Next topic. The the headline here, CNN, these two amusement park giants just merged. Roller coaster fans are nervous. So the two companies, this is Six Flags and Cedar Fair, they're going, or I think this just completed this $8 billion merger. So together they have 42 amusement and water parks. It seems like in the article, there's a couple dynamics. One is people are worried about tickets now becoming more expensive given this merger. The other thing in the mix is the Six Flags company tried premiumization in 2022 to bring fewer people into the parks, but have them pay more. So the CEO made some rough commentary about how like he was walking around the parks and it seemed like Kmart or Walmart kind of clientele, and he wanted to elevate it to more like Target. So they tried that. Here we are. What do you think the benefits are of this merger for these two companies?
You could imagine, I'm sure there's some synergy case that they're going to make. Like you don't need two marketing teams or what have you. Even if they change zero, that's going to be one thought. I'm sure the next thought is, depending on the proximity, is there a price play to be had? And then I think the more interesting thing is the season pass. You know, there's always the season pass that I remember. It was typically like you go to the amusement park once, and you go if you go twice, it's worth the season pass. Now I don't know if that ratio is the same, but I could envision that they're trying to maybe get it like just like in the ski industry. One pass gets you access to multiple locations, and you can go, and it feels actually really good as a consumer. You're like, great, I have all this flexibility. You don't really end up going anywhere else except the one that's convenient to you. Maybe one trip, but I think that effect is probably going to be there where they would say, hey, now you have access to two parks for the same price. And people think, oh, great, now I'll do that, whether they actually go again or not. I think that could be part of it.
I mean, I just got to talk about the elephant in the room where the CEO is seemingly alienating part of his base by, pseudo insulting them. So
rough commentary there.
Yeah, that's a bit of a tough approach. But that being said, when you're thinking about the benefit to the consumer, the theme parks one is kind of interesting, because if you're taking on this strategy of having less people visit, that inherently has value to those less people that visit, because when you go to a theme park, the ideal day to go is to time it where there's nobody there. Those days where there's rain in the forecast and it doesn't actually rain are the best days to go to a theme park, right? And that is aligned with getting a smaller base there. So if there's less people there, the people that do attend, there's inherently more value to them. So there's perhaps a play to be made there, but they have to kind of get into the details of what that means from a revenue and margin perspective. But I think more broadly, it's a point that Pete was making, where as a result of having scale in place, there's a lot, it just opens a lot more doors of what they could do from a go-to-market perspective, whether it's, having a season pass where that allows you to go to one park versus a handful of parks versus, multiple parks within a certain geography, those types of things. There's a lot of plays to be made, not to mention the fact that, I would have to imagine without a doubt, there's a cost play to be had there that just simply makes them more competitive from a long-term perspective.
So I find this fascinating. Out of all the articles that was sent out, this is probably one of the fun ones for me, because I grew up in Ohio, and we used to go to Cedar Park, and we used to go to Geauga Lake, and I used to go with my buddies and everything like that. And there's a nostalgic segment of the population, so I think there's a segmentation play here. So if you listen to the nostalgic segmentation guys, so I grew up in the 80s, 90s, and if you listen to us, we're not going to go every week or once a month. We're going to go maybe once a year, So, but if you use us as a barometer for where your pricing should be, you're going to have to be like $10 a ticket, because I'm not going there for the value of the theme park. I'm going there as a connection to what it was like when I was growing up in Ohio, right? So if you have to listen to the right segment in order to develop your pricing strategy, as well as your marketing and who you're actually targeting. So the reason I say that is because with these parks, I think Cedar was also not doing well financially, right? So there's a cost of maintenance. There's a cost to modernize the equipment. There's a cost to make it where you attract different segments of the population. And they just didn't have the ability to go do that. And now they do. So I think there is fundamentally a better business model now, regardless of what the price point is going to be able to go attract different types of people. So from a segmentation perspective, I think this gives them more flexibility to attack the right type of people that are out there, segments of consumers that are out there, be it the low one, be it the high one, and anywhere in between. The other thing is, last time I checked, Disney World is probably the peak where people are paying whatever, $500 a person per day to go to a theme park, which, don't get me started on Disney. That's a different story. So the people's ability to pay and willingness to pay is there in a theme park environment, but you have to have other things to go with it. You can't just be a roller coaster park. You can't just be this other type of park. So you have to have that whole experience. So this really gives them the ability to think through what the consumers want, what they need, how to get that repeat business, and to Pete's point and Adnan's point, be able to package multiple parks together to go on summer road trips and go to multiple parks with your parents. There's a lot of flexibility and choices they get through this merger. And I think that's the best part. Now, the thing that I hope they do correctly is segment their population correctly, understand what their needs are, what they're willing to pay and for what, and modernize this environment, because it kind of goes back to the previous conversations around Netflix. They're building that experience center. They're not calling it a theme park. They're not calling it a park, period. So they need to start taking a little bit of that chapter and saying, okay, how do I create that experience? How do I create what these consumers are going to spend, 10 hours on a Saturday doing? How do I make that better for them, where their willingness to pay does go up? And they have the flexibility now to be able to do
that. With what you just said, it sort of gives me, like, on the branding and the experience and nostalgia, there's sort of a pro to this merger and a concern or watch out for the merger in my mind. The pro is the different characters. I don't know exactly what they are, but the different theme parks have access to different superhero characters or what have you, and they can like pull in those different assets to put in both places. So that gives them a little more flexibility and tug on the heartstrings of different kids or segments or whatever. And then on the concern side, it's the analogy of, I don't know if you've heard of this company called Diamond Baseball Holdings, but they own more or less 1 in 3 minor league teams now in the United States and Canada. So they've basically been buying up like a PE play. There's a premiumization aspect, there's the consistency, but I think that the critical element of that people complain about is that you're going to make it all like vanilla. Every minor league baseball park is going to feel the same, with the same TV screens, with the same food, Sodexo, whatever. Whereas the joy of going to a minor league ball game is that it's like cheap and rickety and nostalgic in the way that it's been for 100 years. And so I think there's sort of that concern. You don't want to just make the branding feel the same between parks that you're combining.
Yeah, yeah.
Great point.
They did mention that there's the coverage of the parks don't overlap too much. So
Yeah.
to this point, that's a good thing that they could keep certain parks, for different segments. They can segment their market and have parks, aligned to the different segments, so they're not all the same that you're going to. So I think the flexibility is tremendous that they're going to get by doing this merger. So it's good.
Yeah, this is Six Flags has a deal with Warner Brothers for the rights to DC Comics and Looney Tunes, and Cedar Fair has the rights to Peanuts and Snoopy.
Nice.
FYI. Okay, next up. So this was in the Wall Street Journal. Saks owner to buy Neiman Marcus with help from Amazon. All right, so Saks is owned. This is Saks Fifth Avenue, obviously the luxury store. Saks is owned by Hudson's Bay Company. This is a $2.65 billion deal to buy Neiman Marcus, who has been private equity owned. They also filed for bankruptcy protection in 2020. There's a lot of layers to this one because there's the retail aspect of it, the luxury market aspect of it, and then also why would Amazon get involved? So where do you want to start with this one?
I'm really going to judge them by how they take advantage of this merger. So if they take advantage of this merger, and I think in the article they talked about it a little bit, now they've got more buying power from their suppliers and they can cut or reduce costs, therefore they'll be more profitable. That's great. That's one of the benefits of having more buying power. That's really good. But if that's the only thing that they focus on, they're in trouble. They're going to come back to that because consumers, going back to actually the last two conversations we just had, consumers are changing in how they buy. And we've talked about this with other articles also. We're not typically going into malls and just buying, a shirt or clothes. We're typically buying online. But we may go to the mall to try on different things, to see, touch, and feel, experience different things, but we might look for deals online and end up buying online, rather than at the store. So there's a lot of experiential, I'm using that word again, places that are opening up, not for purchase necessarily, but to experience different things. So one concept that I remember reading about a while back is they're putting together, because malls are going defunct, right, all over the country. So they're putting in like a golf simulation in one of the stores in the mall, and they want you to come in and try all these different types of golf equipment, and then you can go home and buy from wherever you want. So these multiple branding companies are coming together to create this, environment for you to try different things, and then you can buy from wherever you want. And I think people are just testing these different methodologies of how to become a retailer in the future, because I think it will change. So in this merger, if they I'm going to stick to malls, I'm going to have the traditional approach to how I source products, how I price products, how I reach the consumer. I'm going to put promotional activities together like Macy's, and all these other things. I don't think they'll last very long. So if they change their fundamental strategy on how they're reaching consumers and meeting the needs of the consumer based on how we are purchasing now and how we will purchase in the future, I think they'll do really well and this merger is going to be successful. But if they focus on cost and reduction of costs to survive, I just don't think it will.
What's really fascinating to me about this play is the Amazon involvement, meaning that let's just, if we were to take Amazon out of the equation, then it does seem very much like what I'll call a traditional M&A play where you are cutting a little bit of cost out of the equation, and as a result of quick scale, there is a benefit. But with Amazon coming to the mix, what it sounds like is they have this realization that, I'd say continual realization of what they can bring to the table, because they've got expertise in taking brands and helping them operationally kind of transform their business and making that technology play in the right way. And then you start to think about Amazon a little more broadly, and you start to get the sense that they've, in essence, done something very similar over and over again, with one example being, they're obviously traditionally a online retail outlet, but then made an adjacent market play by bringing up AWS because that was something that was required for their operations. So they said, hey, we've gotten really good at having a cloud processing in play. Well, let's just sell that to our customers. So now what they've done is they've taken an equity stake in this merger. So now they can benefit financially from their expertise of taking this kind of traditional retail brand and bringing their online presence in a way that aligns with their existing strategy. So that part to me is just super fascinating and tells me that it is the intention is a little bit more than kind of what I'll call a traditional retail M&A play.
The other stake in this is Salesforce. I don't know if you got, was that in the article? They're also in the mix.
I didn't read that.
Interesting.
There's like the retail and e-commerce blend, and Amazon probably, they're going to help with faster logistics in one tech play, or online experience that makes it really seamless between in-store, or maybe in some way combining or bringing some tech experience to the in-store shopping. So who knows? I don't know what the plans are, but that's sort of, it doesn't make sense for them just to be an investor and allocate capital there. I'm sure they have a growth play that they want to.
It does remind me of the Whole Foods investment that they had made.
Yeah.
So maybe we can learn from that piece, which the Whole Foods one, they didn't fundamentally change too many things except for the delivery mechanism to automate that a little bit. So I think, there could be something, but I think Amazon, just like anybody, all of us, I think everybody's trying to figure out how consumers will make decisions moving forward. And so, having investments and not knowing exactly what to do is okay, as long as they know they're going to do something, something different than just traditional retail and mall. That has to change, and that mindset needs to change. And I think you guys are right that Amazon is there for that purpose, which is, how do I rethink how shoppers are, especially, and I think, Tracy, you mentioned this, in the luxury item, because all segments are dropping like rocks except for luxury. Right, Louis Vuitton and the entire portfolio company of what was it, LVMH, they're just killing it post COVID. They're absolutely killing it. But with a lot of these things, now there's sort of a population that's coming up that's like, no, we're not. These big brands are not hand making their purses anymore. Therefore, I'm not going to buy them anymore. I'm going to go to lower brands, small startup brands. So there's going to be a swing, a pendulum swing that's there, but fundamentally, consumers are shopping differently. And with Amazon in their back pocket, hopefully they'll be able to utilize that to kind of meet our needs moving forward.
All right. Last headline. This was from MIT. MIT did this press release. This was actually back in March, but the headline of the press release is Harnessing Generative AI for Smarter Supplier Negotiations. It says project seeks to, quote, place a data scientist in the pockets of procurement professionals. What they're doing is building basically a chatbot for a pharma company with $35 billion in annual spend to help managers negotiate more effectively. Part of it is providing information on things like how prices are trending for specific materials.
What just struck me was that just as B2B, pricers, whole individually, we'll often build models that, give salespeople a target. So in a given situation, they have some guidance because an automated tool can know millions of right places to start for your unique situation. And it's almost obvious, but I don't actually know if procurement teams have the same price automation software, but on the flip side, right? Like, hey, this specific deal that I'm trying to negotiate with this supplier has a target price of this, or target cost for us, an investment of this, where this is kind of building that in some ways. It doesn't say exactly how it's doing it, but you can imagine the usefulness of just having some bookends of where a given deal should be. That could be one step. And then kind of even the further step is actually helping me realize that, like, is this automated bot helping you negotiate, like that article that we talked about a few months ago. So anyway, but that's kind of the interesting piece, or the dynamic of it, that makes it equivalent or just a different side of the equation to things that we breathe every day.
Question in my mind is, as this technology and presumably automation is going to be used, the risk is that this positions anything that's being purchased in a very commoditized way. So then the question is, how are you making that apples to apples comparison? And maybe the technology is out there to highlight that, but that decision-making process from a procurement person has to go beyond simply what is, say, the lowest price, because the decision criteria, as we all know, price is one of many factors that come into play. What are you getting in exchange for that price? So does this technology give you a sense of what the trade-offs with regard to price you are making, so they're guiding the broader business to the right decision for them?
This was really interesting to me because I feel like they're starting their use case at a very simple level. And the reason I'm saying it's simple, 10 years ago, we were talking about natural language processing as a way to layer on top of data sets. So people that are not analytically forward, they can use their sort of words and their voice to be able to extract information. So the concept on the surface is not very, it's not very advanced. But what's advanced is if you have disparate data sources and you haven't put those pieces together for conclusions, but you can use your voice to be able to do that, then it becomes really powerful. And I like the fact that they're using RAG, their sort of own data set, to be able to do this rather than the open source sort of, chat GPT type of environment, because you're isolating yourself to your data set. You're limiting the hallucinations that can happen through AI. So you've got a little bit more control over the output that it's providing for you to be able to make better decisions. So I think the use case is a strong one. I just don't, for me, it's a half a step forward, and you have to have patience. It's going to be expensive. So my question is, are these companies that are using it for these types of purposes, will they have patience with it in the long run to be able to finally get what they need out of it? Because they're going to fall apart here. They're going to fall apart and go, oh, they didn't take into account this one data source. Oh, they forgot to take into account this. Oh, it didn't do this. It didn't do that. There's going to be a lot of reasons why the information that gets spit out, you're not going to be able to use it for what you want to use it for. That requires patience. It requires money. It requires time. It requires all of these things. And companies typically are very short-sighted. Companies for profit. They're usually looking at their quarterly result, their yearly results. And these are going to be expensive tools and mechanisms. And that ROI is not going to be there and may not be there for a few years. Are CEOs going to have the patience for it? I don't know. We'll see.
You know what else is interesting too is that if you just put yourself in the shoes of someone inside of a business, you're a P&L owner, you go task supply chain with buying you this thing that you've asked for, that you've thought about, that you need. There's sort of different segments of that category of purchase that you probably think about. And that by that I mean, you might say, hey, I need $100,000 piece of software that helps me be more productive. Don't go just buy something that's like half the price and doesn't do the job at all. So you could almost imagine that where this could be deployed most easily is like, hey, we have nuts and bolts and tape and pens that we need to buy on like the most basic commodity level. Go ahead, do those low value things. But then as you go up the chain, like you almost need a human in the mix for the foreseeable future. To make sure you're advocating for the things that really matter. So you don't just end up with something that doesn't answer the mail and then it ends up wasting money and totally overturning the business case in the first place.
Yeah, I totally agree with that comment. And then that also leads to what Adnan was saying. And I think, Tracy, this is like the other paper that you sent out, the Walmart one. That one I had a lot more concern over, because the Walmart one, they're basically feeding it the constraints. They're feeding their model the constraints, and they're allowing it to come to an agreement with the vendor. So it's doing a little bit more of the finalization of the deal, let's say, the decision-making of the deal. And that concerns me because to Adnan's point before, I think that's a rapid rate to commoditization rather than
Yeah.
understanding what the value impact will be for your organization. And that comes from a little bit of a human understanding right now, because you could go for something a little bit more expensive because you know that there's some other inherent value that you're going after that's not going to be in your business constraints rules requirement that you write for this engine. And that's the piece that, because this engine is going to be great for speeds and feeds comparison. Is it going to be great for value comparison? That's going to be the question that I would have for that Walmart article that Tracy sent out.
It's kind of funny because I would also imagine companies, looking at like, okay, Walmart's doing this. It seems to be working for them. We've got all these people. Is there a way we can automate? And like Walmart being Walmart and playing by a different set of rules on so many levels, not only in what resources they have, but also their ability to what they're selling. There's so many different things that are different, but I can understand what you're saying. This is just like, it's a flag. It's a potentially green flag to other companies that may be misleading.
Yeah. And it's a pendulum, right? So I could see it swinging one way because you think you're going to get these cost advantages. Then I could see it go, oh, this is not good because I've got solutions in here that I really don't find valuable, and my competitors are using much more valuable solutions, and there could be a swing the other way. And over time, you'll find sort of that happy medium. But again, that takes patience, money, time, all these other things.
You asked for a car, everyone got a Yugo.
Yeah, exactly right. That's right.
Well, the point that was made earlier, where we're seeing the high value segments performing so well, tells me that brands at minimum in the B2C world, they know their differentiators, they're capitalizing on those differentiators, and they're being successful as a result of it, right? And this is in essence bucking that trend.
Yeah.
Trying at least.
Yeah, I think the world we live in, we do pricing in a B2B environment, but we do the go-to-market activation piece in a B2C environment. And that's what makes us effective in our solution. And I think that's the piece that I don't know in working with a B2C environment, how much AI automation right now you can do in that type of relationship type of environment. I just question that piece, where it's at now.
Makes sense. All right, let's end it there. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.